She stood quietly in the crowded room, her hands clasped together as if holding on to courage no one else could see. The casting hall was buzzing with confidence, faces painted with makeup, people rehearsing lines under their breath, and whispers of who had already been chosen. Among them stood a simple woman, dressed plainly, without the polish or shine that the judges seemed to admire. From the moment she walked in, eyes rolled, and a few chuckles escaped from the corner. She didn't look like the kind of person anyone expected to impress on a stage like this. When her turn finally came, she stepped forward with hesitation. The panel of judges exchanged quick glances, and before she could even begin, one of them shook his head. A cold voice announced that she was not what they were looking for. Just like that, she was dismissed, as though her presence in that room had been nothing more than a mistake. The words cut deeply, but she held her ground. For a moment, it seemed she would quietly leave, blending back into the shadows of the hall. But then, something shifted. She stopped at the door, turned her head slightly, and spoke a single sentence. It wasn't loud, yet it carried through the air like a spark. The entire room fell silent. The same judges who, moments earlier, dismissed her, leaned forward, their expressions changing from boredom to disbelief. The other contestants froze, stunned by the unexpected force hidden in her simple words. No one could have predicted that the woman everyone overlooked would deliver something so powerful. The sentence she spoke didn't just defend her place in the room, it challenged the very idea of what the casting was supposed to be about. Her voice trembled at first, but each word struck with undeniable truth, and the silence that followed was heavier than any applause. In that moment, the simple woman no one wanted to notice suddenly became unforgettable. And what she said next would leave not only the judges, but the entire room absolutely speechless. The room was still frozen, and all eyes stayed fixed on her, as if waiting for more. But she didn't move, didn't rush to explain herself. That single sentence hung in the air, heavier than anything else said that day. The judges, who were used to dismissing hundreds of faces without a second thought, suddenly seemed unsure. Their pens stopped scratching across paper, their voices caught in their throats. For the first time, they wanted to know who this woman really was. She wasn't a polished star, not the type who had trained in expensive schools or worn designer outfits to auditions. She was someone ordinary. Too ordinary for a stage like this, many would have thought. Yet there was something about her presence, something unshakable, that made her different. People began whispering, curious now instead of dismissive. Who was she? Why did she come here if she knew she didn't fit in with the glittering crowd? The truth was hidden in her past, a story few would have guessed. She hadn't grown up dreaming of fame or recognition. In fact, she had spent years in the shadows, carrying responsibilities no one else wanted. Every scar, every hardship had shaped the way she spoke that sentence, with conviction that could not be faked. Behind her plain appearance was a depth most people never took the time to see. And that was the conflict in the room. The judges had to decide if they were willing to admit they were wrong, if they could see beyond surface beauty and polished rehearsals. The other contestants, meanwhile, shifted nervously, sensing that the competition had just changed. No one knew what would happen next, but everyone understood one thing. This simple woman had just rewritten the rules of the casting. The air in the room felt heavy, as though everyone was holding their breath. The judges leaned forward, finally breaking their silence, and one of them asked her to repeat what she had said. But she didn't. Instead, she stood taller, her eyes steady, as if daring them to remember her words without needing to hear them again. That quiet defiance only deepened the tension. Whispers rippled through the contestants lined up against the wall, some impressed, others worried. They had all come prepared with rehearsed lines, practiced movements, and perfect smiles. But this woman had just shifted the entire stage with nothing more than her truth. The judges exchanged uncertain glances, clearly torn. They weren't used to being challenged, and certainly not by someone they had dismissed so quickly. One of them cleared his throat, his voice sharp, as he questioned her, pressing to know why she had come if she didn't fit the image they expected. For a moment, it looked like she might falter. Her hands trembled at her sides, and the quiet strength she carried seemed ready to slip away. But then her eyes hardened, and she stepped forward again. Every sound in the hall vanished, the tapping of shoes, the rustle of papers, even the faint hum of the lights above. All that remained was her voice, steady now with emotion that cut into the silence like a blade. Her words were not rehearsed, not memorized, not meant to impress. They came from a place that none of the judges expected, a place raw and unfiltered, and that made them powerful. The mystery now was not just about what she said, but about what she might say next. Could she really stand against the expectations of the casting? Could a simple woman with nothing to prove shift the minds of people who had seen hundreds of like her walk away? The unanswered questions hung heavier than the silence, and everyone waited, breathless, for what was to come.
Just when the room seemed ready to explode with anticipation, one of the judges leaned back in his chair and broke the silence with a cutting laugh. His voice was sharp, almost mocking, as he accused her of playing a clever trick, of using emotion to distract from her lack of talent. The words sliced through the air, and for the first time, the crowd shifted uncomfortably. The suspense that had turned in her favor now twisted into something darker. Was this the moment she would be silenced again, just as she had been so many times before? But then something unexpected happened. A member of the audience, someone who had been quietly observing from the back of the hall, stood up. It wasn't another contestant, but a well-known figure in the industry, someone the judges themselves respected. All eyes swung toward him as he stepped closer, his gaze fixed on the woman. He didn't speak right away, but the very act of him moving forward changed the atmosphere instantly. Whispers erupted. Why was he here? And why was he paying attention to her? The judges suddenly looked uneasy, as though control of the room was slipping from their hands. The woman, who only moments ago had been fighting alone, now seemed to hold an invisible power. The stakes had shifted dramatically. If this influential figure sided with her, the judge's authority would be shaken in front of everyone. The contestants clutched their scripts tighter, sensing that this casting was no longer predictable. It was turning into something historic. The tension grew unbearable. Would the respected figure defend her or expose her? Would the judges fight to keep control or admit they had overlooked something extraordinary? The silence stretched again, but this time it carried even more weight because everyone knew the next word spoken would decide everything. The respected figure finally stepped into the light, his voice calm but steady as he addressed the room. He told the judges that the woman's words were not a trick nor an act, but something far rarer, authentic truth. He reminded them that casting was not about fitting an image, but about finding a voice that could move hearts, and hers had already done what no polished performance had managed that day. The audience erupted into murmurs of agreement, and for the first time the judges looked cornered. Their authority was slipping under the weight of undeniable reality. The lead judge, unwilling to lose control, tried to stand firm. He argued that the industry had rules, standards, and expectations. But before he could finish, the woman lifted her chin and spoke again, her words soft yet piercing. She revealed a part of her story no one expected. She had once auditioned years ago under a different name, dismissed by the very same panel for not being enough. Instead of breaking her, that rejection had driven her to live life outside the stage, gathering the strength and wisdom that now gave her voice such power. The revelation hit the room like a thunderclap. Gasps filled the air, and the judges realized this was not just another hopeful, it was someone they had overlooked before. Someone who had returned not for revenge, but to prove that truth cannot be ignored forever. At last, the panel had no choice but to acknowledge her. The tension that had gripped the room broke as applause rose, first hesitant, then overwhelming. The woman stood still, not smiling, not celebrating, simply holding her ground with quiet dignity. And just when it seemed her story had reached its end, the respected figure made one more announcement. He wasn't there as a guest, but as the new head of the entire production. His first decision was clear. This simple woman would not only stay, she would lead. The hall erupted, and the judges who once dismissed her could do nothing but watch as everything changed in an instant.